Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm so excited that I actually have a community of people that can join me and talk machine learning and organizational success. And I'll be so happy to sort of hear from you guys and have an open dialogue as we walk through the presentation. And I know that there'll be a lot more people watching the recording. So I just want to say that for whoever didn't get to join us live, if you have questions, you're always welcome to get in touch with us. We're always happy to hear from anybody. I guess, Alicia, you're going to be letting people in, right? So I can just continue talking.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we're always really happy to hear from you. We're happy to hear from you via email or LinkedIn. And I know a lot of times as leaders or members of your organization, it's even hard to know where to start a conversation of how to move your organization towards using more machine learning and AI capabilities. And we're totally fine with that. We're totally fine. If you just want to chat and bounce some ideas or perspective off of us, so always feel free to reach out. And today we will be doing part one of our webinar series, which is basically how to get your organization ready for moving towards the direction of AI and ML. And we won't be doing a lot of technical discussion today. That's going to be for part two. But what I really want to talk about is really the fundamentals of how to become an organization that is enabled from its core to create AI success. And so in terms of our agenda, what are we talking about today? First, we're going to discuss why we as BioTeam are talking about AI, and also a little bit about why I, as Anna, am talking to you about AI. And then what challenges do we see organizations facing when they're preparing to move in this direction? And I think it's really important to understand where we are, where each of your organizations is in terms of other teams and other organizations, and sort of what are we struggling with as a community versus an individual organization, and how does that all tie into solutions that maybe need to come from a more sort of community level perspective, or things that are really up to us just within our organization to solve. And then just some action items, really to get you closer to your mission and really make your organization one that is really aligned to sort of a healthy data ecosystem. Let's put it like that. Okay, so why is BioTeam talking about AI? Well, BioTeam is based around three principles of scientific research, data science, and advanced technology. And that is essentially where you also find AI machine learning capabilities. Bringing these things together is what enhances our client's mission, and it really resonates with our mission because that's really the expertise that we bring to the table. And combining these three aspects is really what makes machine learning capable within your organizations. And just like AI really isn't new, we also aren't new. We've been around, and machine learning has been around in various aspects, and we've been around building successful scientific data ecosystems since 2002. And truthfully, the new interest in doing machine learning and developing AI pipelines is just a natural result of the things that we've been helping our clients do for a really long time, which is just really become digitally aligned to their mission. And machine learning and really just great science and good data stewardship requires building data ecosystems where the components are really thoughtfully integrated and thought out, and really importantly synchronized, so that they become a natural progression of the work that happens within the organization. And as we sort of go and look at the challenges, you'll see that there's challenges along the whole spectrum of the workflow here, bringing together scientific instruments, individual data sets, community data sets, and then of course, providing appropriate network capabilities, processing massive data workflows, making all of it scalable, providing appropriate HPC cloud. And then of course, it really resonates into the tools that you use, the workflows, and really importantly, something that is really sort of close to my heart, and I'll introduce myself in the next slide, is this idea of collaboration. And I think it's even more important when we now start talking about machine learning capabilities, because there's already so many things available in our sort of data ecosystem that are possible for organizations to use without starting from scratch. And the ability to collaborate is essential for science, just point blank. But it's really essential for accelerating research into this AI ML sphere. And it's something that's just really important to me. I actually was lucky enough to learn about big data and machine learning from Computomics, and somebody from Computomics is here, which I'm really happy about, because it's really just a testament to the fact that, you know, somebody who does something right can then spread that that knowledge and sort of that best practice to organizations, which now I work with organizations all over the world, essentially, to implement those practices and help organizations all over the world change from that sort of internal collaboration. And that can be also so powerful as a collaboration between companies or between different teams. And I guess that's one of my core tenets, is that I just really think that humans and organizations have huge potential. And also that as companies that want to move towards machine learning, you can't really outsource that internal work. Collaboration is important, but you as an organization have to be aligned to that collaboration. You have to be willing to move in that same direction. You have to be able to sort of resource and manage your expectations and have the people necessary to move your organization where you want it to go. And what I think is really awesome about what I get to do at BioTeam is essentially to help organizations take charge of the change they want to see happen, and do it in a way that really moves them towards their mission. And so what are really the goals of today's webinar? Sort of the assumptions that we see, or the things we see when we walk into organizations, is that leadership can get really excited about machine learning capabilities. But the truth is that underneath that excitement, there's a need for very healthy data systems, and that transformation will require a lot out of leadership. It's going to change and increase the focus on management and ethics, and it's going to put new demands on sort of those infrastructure systems and those CIOs and CTOs within those organizations. But the goal of this webinar and the second one, which we'll talk about data, is really to help you as leaders or members of your organization to really be a champion and someone who understands what it's really going to take to move your organization there. I'm going to start with the sort of classic, what is AI ML? And I don't want us to get stuck in these sort of in this critical aspect of what really is AI, right? So in a very strict sense, something like artificial intelligence is something that can do things that uniquely a human can. So talk, learn, socialize, or reason. But that's not really what most organizations are talking about when they say that they want AI or ML capabilities. They're more so talking about the computational processes that help them come to some sort of conclusion with their data. So I think for the purpose of our webinar, we're going to discuss this as sort of a broad capability to develop predictive models and identify groupings, and just help organizations create pipelines that generate more results and richer results out of the data that they currently have. And of course, those exact methods can range from simple to complex, and complex not necessarily always being better. But I just don't want us to get stuck in this discussion, although I think it's a valid one. The idea is that organizations have data, and we want to move it forward and create analysis capabilities that allow us to generate more insights from that data. And some of it will be very basic statistical aspects of machine learning, and for some organizations, it's going to be a little bit more complex. But again, those underlying fundamentals are going to be the same. And I put this slide in today as I was thinking about something about this sort of what really makes the move towards using AI difficult for organizations. And I think it's because in most organizations, data and people live in this sort of comfortable place where systems and the way that data is created and stored is really generated for human consumption. So it's humans creating folder structures where they analyze and save data from their specific instruments. And there's not really a concern about management or ethics, because we know that we as humans will analyze the data and we can always impart a layer of common sense onto it. But what's required for AI and ML is to really bring both of those things to their sort of extremes. And what I mean by that is that probably 80%, in the future, probably even more, of data that we see within big organizations never gets touched by a human. It is never opened or analyzed or looked at. And even more so if that organization wants to move towards more AI pipelines. So we have to design data and systems that are meant for machine visibility and machine visitation, not for human consumption. And so in that aspect, we have to move away from human sort of aspects of how we look at data and structure. But on the other hand, we have to actually bring a deeper humanity to it, because the algorithms and the pipelines lack that sort of purpose and ethics that is really essential from the human actor within us. And both of those things are actually really difficult for organizations. It's really hard to impart a layer of sort of ethics capabilities, and it's really hard to change the way that all data is managed and stored in a way that maybe doesn't make common sense to the human who has to then store it, because they're not the machine that's going to be able to access it. And so when we talk about those organizational considerations, one of the things I want to say is that moving towards more machine learning capabilities is something that a lot of organizations are thinking about, but they're also thinking about it in the context of a lot of other data concepts, like enhancing data analytics, storage. Should I move to cloud? How do I increase the quality of my data? And so the consideration of ML sort of lives within this consideration of data. And most organizations don't really think about where they are in the full journey of moving towards AI capability. And to be honest with you, I think this is something that's just really important for us to acknowledge, is that while we may throw the word around a lot, most teams are very early on in their capabilities, and that's okay, right? That's one of the things that I think is like important from a social perspective for us to acknowledge, that while we've been gathering data this past decade, and of course much longer, we haven't been thinking about ways to really steward it in the right ways. And why does it all seem so complicated now? And the main challenges that we've sort of identified is skilled talent, things that just don't scale across large organizations, that things are just really slow to process. It's really hard to get cross-functional teams to collaborate, especially as those teams become in different continents. They have different legacy systems. They got integrated at different times. There's really high amounts of data duplication. And we get to some of those more human aspects in terms of governing and explaining or AI models. And then we get to the part that I think is just really the 85% of it, right? And that is, who does your organization consider itself to be? And once you're an organization that really values that data hygiene, the algorithms will be a natural outcropping of that identity. And so what are those fundamental organizational shifts? You have to think about who's going to drive the change, how you're going to manage expectations, how do you view data, and then how do you actually restructure? So who's going to be driving the change? And I think that this is really important to say, that things that become organizational shifts can't be launched in a vacuum. You fundamentally can't bring in one expert and put them somewhere and expect your organization to shift around that person. There has to be a drive from a very sort of basic and fundamental leadership level that our organization is moving in this direction, that we're shifting the culture from a culture of my data to our data. And that as we know that change is going to happen, this is how we're choosing to transform our organization. We know that change will come and we are the drivers of it. And that this drive towards AI and ML doesn't come from a place of sort of, like we have to go there. It's going to be terrible, but we have to go there. And instead from the journey there is going to make us a better organization. And I was thinking for some reason today about like a running metaphor and how our goal as Bio Team is really to coach organizations to sort of like run a marathon, right? Like AI is the marathon, but as you're preparing for that marathon, you make changes. And as you're preparing for AI, you make changes within your organization. And the goal for us is to always make sure that those changes are valuable in and of themselves. That if you create a data warehouse or a data lake, if you create new positions organizationally, that if you change your data management schemes, if you move to the cloud, if you invest in HPC, that those things are valuable in and of themselves, even if you never end up running the marathon, if that makes sense. So that you approach it as sort of the direction where you're taking the organization. And if in the end, AI goes out of favor as it has before, right, for whatever reason, that the changes that are now implemented in your organization are long lasting and beneficial in and of themselves. And I think part of that is also sort of managing the expectation of what AI is going to do. There are situations where you can collaborate with a partner and they can bring you results very quickly. But most likely, if you're trying to change your organization from the inside out, it will take time. And an overinvestment and sort of heightened pressure in the moment is not always going to get you there. More money right now, I'm sure people will say, please don't tell my management to not give me more money. But just the expectation that, again, hiring this superb expert and giving them an insane amount of money now will not really achieve what machine learning can do for your organization in the long term. So as I mentioned before, as we improve data quality practices, data flow pipelines, data governance practices, those things will have value in and of themselves. And the technical challenges will sort of fall away. And you can hire people to help you with the technical challenges, but it means that sort of your internal change management processes won't derail what you can technologically accomplish. And then just one thing I wanted to highlight just in general is that even with part one of the webinar, and then next time we'll be talking about data and sort of how to define your AI task, how to obtain that data, how to create test sets, select models. Even once we cover all that, we will only be touching on a small portion of what a true full sort of machine learning capability is within your organization. And I think that's part of managing the expectations, that it's a lot more than just having a person and telling them, analyze all our data and give us, revolutionary insights. It's about putting that person in a position where they can access the resources to, with time, implement machine learning results into the decision-making of your organization. And again, those organizations that are successful, they're successful because they do reduce data duplication. Their data is easier to access. They can process large amounts of data, and it sort of all makes sense. And then you say, but what is the philosophy and the change behind that? And the change, in my opinion, is just really simple. It's that you're an organization that doesn't see your data as the output, as the end process of what you're trying to do. Your data is the fuel. It's only the beginning of the thing that ignites the engine. And even better if you see that the results are the fuel. And so often we go into an organization and their results are stored in PowerPoints. And I can tell you, PowerPoints do not fuel organizations. They can't. PowerPoints are meant for a human to sit and look and think about, but they're not a way to help data flow through your organization. And there's just really fundamental, basic things like that, that if aligned to an organizational perspective can really make a difference. So what can you really do to understand your data better? Well, the first thing that an organization has to do is understand what data they have. And this is probably true of anybody who's ever talked to an organization about doing AI or ML. And the conversation starts and you say, do you have data? And they say, oh, yes, we have data. And they say, we even have a lot of data. And you're like, that's great. AI loves a lot of data. And then they say, but, well, we don't really know where it is, but we're sure we have it. We don't really know who owns it, but we're still sure we have it. And actually, I don't know if we have access to it, so maybe we're not even sure we have it. And so this basic organizational understanding of where is your data, who has access to it, do you have a person whose job it is to understand those questions? You know, do you have an organizational process to care for that data? And then what is really the culture of our organization? What do we value? Do we value those positions of data stewards? And are we even utilizing our talent in the best way? Do we prioritize data comfort or technical comfort? Are we willing to reinvest in retraining and getting our people interested in these sort of different approaches to their data? And some of the things that we've seen personally really helping big organizations is just stepping back and considering the thing that's before AI, right? Like the thing that's before the marathon is maybe like a 5K, right? And that 5K is something like a data commons or a company-wide data management solution that's really going to have insane value for you and can lead to implementing machine learning. But once you implement that, you may say, well, actually, once our data science teams have access to this data commons with organized data, we're actually fine with the analysis solutions we have. And there's not this pressure anymore to move towards more advanced analytical solutions, because now that we've brought sort of data health to our analysis teams, they can already sort of really advance. So those are some of the things that we've seen successful. And then how do you really restructure, right? And I think one of the really important things for organizations, because getting an AI expert is just going to not be the only thing, and it may not be even necessary. Can you retrain your people? Can you reclassify what machine learning work is? How are you going to recruit for that team? Where will you put that team in your organization? Are they going to go into IT? Are they going to go under research, into R&D? Will they be sort of a new team that talks across our IT and research? And what are you really going to ask them to do? Those are really important questions before these initiatives kick off. And really being clear about the kind of investment that your organization is willing to make over which specific period of time, and really committing to it, because there's really nothing worse than sort of starting this drive and shift, and then 3 years in saying, oh, we don't have, it's not paying off. Forget it, because that will negate all the potential effort of those sort of intermediate steps. And then just really important things to think about is like, what kind of compute and storage accommodations will you have to make, right? And a lot of things that we've seen is that those support systems that have been traditionally just compute intensive require now people, again, they require people who can help scientists clean their data. They require people who help scientists understand how much data they need, how to keep, how to create cycles of data flow. And that's an investment that typically organizations don't think about in terms of their cloud or storage capabilities. And again, is there going to be long-term buy-in for these changes? And so an example that I always like to bring up in terms of sort of creating dynamic groups of people is our team at BioTeam. We aren't all the same. In fact, we're all different. And you couldn't have hired 40 of us who are the same, but because we can combine our capabilities, like I will never work on a project alone, but my capability will be combined with someone who's more technical than me, who's maybe a little bit less high level organizational, and someone who's a cloud specialist, right? And that's how other organizations have to think about their machine learning teams as well. It should never be 3 machine learning experts, but it should be a scientist who has had some training and some like experience talking about these things. It should be someone who's a data steward. It should be someone who is on the analysis side, and give them time to learn to talk to each other. Give them time to form a common language. Give them time to learn how to resource each other. And that's going to be so powerful for your organization, but you have to give them that capability. And never forget that there is a cost. And I think that this is very responsible of organizations to not ignore, that it matters. There's a difference between operationally running machine learning or AI capability and the cost involved with that, and the sort of the infrastructure required for that, and research functions of AI and ML. And I say that with the understanding that at BioTeam, we are fully on board to the fact that compute is a basic scientific need, and researchers should be trusted to sort of request and use it at will. But with that trust comes a responsibility for them to understand how to use it. And honestly, long gone are the days when the scientists whose job depends on big data, on any data, choose to not participate in sort of the management or stewardship of that data. When we go into organizations, there's oftentimes research teams who are so adverse to even wanting to understand how much data their experiments generate, because they say, oh, that's IT's responsibility, right? Like I don't know how much data my imager generates. It doesn't matter because I need all these images. And I understand the hesitancy, but at the same time, we have to create a culture again of initiating scientists into understanding those IT needs, and of initiating IT into understanding how to help scientists manage those needs. And a lot of organizations really are equipped to tackle these challenges. And they do have a lot of data, and they have a lot of talented people within their organization. And there's just a few sort of pivots that need to be made in order to align things to be moving in the right direction, in the same direction, right? There's some policies and some protocols. There's maybe a prioritization financially of production grade storage or cloud systems, allocation of those resources for system maintenance, or maybe sort of that data stewardship, that data management team, and really looking internally for talent, or really hiring individuals who are aligned with where the organization is moving. And from a project management perspective, it's really important to have teams and management. We really often, and I don't say it like a blanket statement, but often we suggest and encourage organizations to create sort of these scientific data officer positions that can sort of leverage, or not argue on the part of, but really try to benefit research and communicate that benefit to IT. And I think that's just really important within the management of scientific processes. And as I mentioned before, collaboration in terms of tools and analytics, collaboration can be very, very powerful. And there's a lot of solutions and tools already out there that have been developed for a number of machine learning capabilities that don't require you to develop your own pipelines and your own models even, but they do require you to have an organization where that data can flow to those models that have already been developed. And just on a very psychological level, when dealing with clients, I always try to tell them that there's sort of this internal desire and a bias for things that sound really promising, right? For someone who says, no, we'll take the internal work out of it for you as a vendor. And that's just really not going to work out long term. And I think it's very different than a true collaboration. If your organization is shifting in the right direction and you bring a partner who's going to help you go faster, that's great. But to say someone is going to run the marathon for you is probably not going to work out. And the last thing that I think is just really still important is to always know that where we are today, like, truthfully looking at what these models are doing in research and how they're translated into the clinical sphere, always assume you're going to have a human close by, implementing those very human capabilities that these models are just not capable of providing at the moment. But never have a human too close, because then it's not machine learning. And I just think that's funny. So just something I like to say. And so in conclusion, I think that there's 3 tenets that are really, really important for organizations. And that's design systems where the data is the fuel of your company, meaning that there's people who are responsible for it. There's systems that can handle it. There's networks that can sort of support it. There's places where it can live and be accessed. There's tools that are close by. The data will become the gravitational pull of everything else. If you can take care of that data, and that's why we mentioned sort of think about a data lake first, or whatever warehouse solution, that can really take you really far. And then as an organization, you have to commit to the necessary change and perpetually explain and align different aspects of your team to that mission. And if you think, oh, this isn't technical enough for me, like we're there, I just want to talk about data, then join us on next month's webinar, where we'll talk about finding a problem and sort of ideation of what should an AI ML question sound like. We'll devise questions together, so it'll be a little bit more interactive. We'll talk about data types, data collection, data storage, data integration. So some of those more data heavy challenges, but I don't know, like, I guess just from my perspective and what I've seen is that these things are outcrops of the way an organization is behaving otherwise, and become much easier and smoother when you align leadership, when you create those positions, when you put everyone in the same direction, and then storing data in one place, that it becomes sort of a no-brainer and everyone just sort of gets in line. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. I'm done talking. We can start chatting, and feel free to sign up for our newsletter. I know that we have, I think, another webinar coming out about data commons on Azure, and you can always email me, find us on LinkedIn, connect however you want. So I'll stop sharing, and then we can take some questions, if there's any questions.
Anna, this is Adam Marco from Panasas.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, and formerly from Bioteam, but thank you for organizing this and for this very comprehensive overview. Did feel a little bit like a mini assessment. But and you touched on this in multiple parts, but I was wondering, are there any, if you had to pick one thing that organizations do wrong regarding AI and ML, what would that be?
I would say it's the expectations, right? It's sort of the hope that this is going to be something that solves all of their previously unanswered questions tomorrow.
Yep.
And I don't know, like, I've had some pretty deep conversations with people about like what do we really expect AI, like, in its maybe advanced form to do for us? And I think like the best answer I've gotten, and I'm kind of curious, maybe you have one too, but someone explained it to me essentially that like really the strength at the moment, we use machine learning mostly to just process huge amounts of data, right? Which like we can't do, but that's not really using it to its full capacity. What it can really do is it can bring out associations that when we look at them and we sort of think about them, they lie at the cuspis between our understood world and our sort of not understood world. But right there where, because the algorithm presented it in a different way, it allows us to make sense of the chaos, right? And so it like presents the combination of correlations that finally make sense to us. And that's what we should really be thinking of using machine learning models on big data and organizations for, is to help us very incrementally create those ordered understanding patterns out of things that felt chaotic before, little by little, right? And eventually we'll get somewhere, but it's not going to elucidate like a whole new world for you tomorrow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that helps.
Do you agree? I mean, do you, or like, I don't know, I'm just curious, like.
Well, I address this a lot, obviously, from the infrastructure standpoint, and
Yeah.
Not as holistically as you're able to, but what I see happening is a kind of mismatch of investment. So whether that's hiring staff but no infrastructure, or buying a bunch of GPUs but no, I'm dealing with this actually, a bunch of GPUs and 1 gigabit network connections. So everyone gets so excited about the hype, they don't think about the whole solution. The
whole picture. Thank you. Thank you. And because they're so sure they have all this data, all they need is this like insane amount of compute, and we're going to go, and we're not going to go. We're just, we're not going to go.
I'll add to what you said, Anna.
Yeah, Eduardo, go ahead.
That is, I think it's a little bit of a culture change. We as scientists, we were raised based on this hypothesis-driven kind of research. And what you're saying is absolutely, there are tasks that you can set off a machine, call it whatever you want, AI.
Call it whatever you want. Whatever.
In the end, I call all of it is solving equations, right? It's a bunch of linear regression or whatever it is. But call it AI because it's more sexy.
It'll get people moving, right? Like that, the term gets people motivated.
Yeah, it's fundamentally changing, not even changing, but being accepting that the amount of data that we're able to generate is so huge today that we're unable to focus on every single part of it. And what machine learning can do for us, it can come up with some correlations that we were unable to see because it's just not human for us to be able to see those. And then we can dive into those and say, is this only a correlation, or there is some causation to this that I can investigate with a hypothesis-driven kind of research? But that's a big paradigm shift that people are, they were not raised to think that way. And
they want to open files, they want to get results, they want to go on their computer, open their file, double click it, look at it, and make some inference. And I can tell you, and if Sebastian is still here listening, but like they work with crop companies, so agricultural companies, and they generate insane amounts of data that become even frightening when you think about drones and then genetics of thousands of plants. Like there's no way a human will ever open any of those files. It has to be a machine. It just has to, Yeah.
And all the aspects that you mentioned, I think that change aspect of it is just difficult to change the way that you approach, to change the way, in some way, shape, or form. I think that the easiest part is to hire some brilliant person and to buy some expensive hardware, right?
Which is why Panasys is in business, which is fine, right? Like that's part of it. It's all part of it. But it can't be the only part, because we're not doing a service to each other.
Right.
So, Judah, did you have a question as well?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this great talk, ma'am. I am from India. I am myself I am a microbiologist, ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. I mean, you told about AI. So, AI, it's nothing but it has no creativity. It's a not it's a can't learn to think outside a box. So you already said key. It's maybe increase the processability rate, the storage rate, everything is the company's production rate is also maybe increase the production rate. But in case we in our country or in some development country, the every company don't have this type of trained AI trainer. So that's why maybe it's maybe create some generation knowledge gap, or it's maybe a cause, maybe the main cause of unemployment. So how we overcome this point then?
Yeah, and I think that this is sort of the crux of this is the point of what I was saying, is that it's not really the expensive compute, and it's not the expensive shiny things that can really make a difference. It's the willingness to be digitally bye Eduardo. It's the willingness to be digitally flexible, right? And to think in a different way. And this is probably naive because I don't live in those places, but organizations anywhere can pivot in that direction. And if there's an organization that creates and stores data in a responsible way, they will be so attractive as partners to other international organizations that sort of their growth will be fueled from their intrinsic value of caring for data.
And I think some of those, oops, my microphone stopped. Let's see. Yvonne, am I still good?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. Yeah, so I think some of those will spawn from that. To address unemployment, I mean, that requires, international pressure.
But I think the collaborative nature of AI can bring organizations together in a way that can unite teams from unlikely places, right? And I think that that's a really beautiful aspect of it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. That's my privileged perspective. So please take it up well. Anyway, 153, how are we all feeling? If there's any more questions, as you can tell, I love talking. If you even want to just talk about philosophical things, I'm always there. So yeah, thanks everyone.